And they can invest whatever they want in that Roth IRA.
We can invest as
Okay.
fiduciaries.
At what age do we have to do required minimum distributions? How does that work in an IRA? How does that work in a Roth?
Wait till the 10th year. Let it get all of those gains. Let it continue to grow tax exempt. And now the savings and taxes for you is $1, but for your kids could be more than double.
Awesome. You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. So today we're going to talk about Roth conversions.
One of my favorite topics.
I love it. So talk to me. Why would someone might want to do a Roth conversion? And what is a Roth conversion?
Well, first, I'm a huge believer in Roth conversions, but it doesn't make sense for everybody. So, what is a Roth conversion? It's where you take assets that are in a traditional IRA, a qualified account that is tax deferred money, and you convert it over into a Roth IRA, which Roth IRAs are tax exempt.
Okay.
But when you convert it at the time of conversion, on that year, when you convert it, you're going to pay taxes on it. And it's going to be taxed at your ordinary income tax rate, which plays a huge factor when we're calculating for Roth conversions.
So there's people sometimes that ask, "Hey, I thought I'm not allowed to make a contribution into a Roth because I make too much money. So how's this different converting money into a Roth?"
Great. So the government has a limitation on if you make too much money, then they're going to limit how much you can put into a Roth IRA in any given year, a
Okay.
contribution limit.
Okay.
However, when it comes to a Roth conversion, there is no income limitation. Warren Buffett himself could do $1 million conversion
Oh,
over
wow.
into a Roth. He'd have to pay taxes, right? You're gonna have to pay taxes on that $1 million or whatever your tax bracket is, and in his case, it's probably 37%. But the next question people would ask is, does it make sense?
Sure.
And you have to do the math. That's where financial planning comes into play, because a lot of things are going to play a part into the factors of if it makes
What are a
sense.
few things that you want to look at if I'm trying to just from eyeball it, does it make sense to do a Roth conversion on myself? What are a couple things I should be aware of?
Your current age,
Okay.
your current income,
Hmm.
you know, um, long term. What are the long term goals? Because when you convert a Roth IRA, the converted amount has to be held in that Roth IRA without being touched for a minimum of 5 years. But since you're paying taxes on it, you want it to grow enough to make up for those taxes. And then so you can get the benefit after that growth. So there's a good break even age and you want to do it. But then after that point, it
Okay.
grows tax exempt. So,
Okay, so let's think of an example. Let's say I'm a 60-year-old guy
mhm.
who wants to retire in 5 years. Does it make sense? And I have $2 million in an IRA. Does it make sense for me to do a Roth conversion?
It depends. I want to give you some follow-up questions so I
Okay,
can better answer it.
do it.
And so let's say, is this 60-year-old person, they're still working, 5 years to retirement, right?
Yeah, let's say
Okay.
they're still working. Yes.
What's their income?
Mm,
Okay,
$100,000.
100,000. And they're married?
They're married. Yes.
Okay, and how old's their spouse?
Let's say they're the same age, 60
Same
years
age.
old.
Any kids?
Yes, 3 children, all adults over the age of 21.
Okay, perfect. So $100,000, 60 years old. Okay, what is the main purpose of the assets? All the assets. It doesn't have to be in the part we're converting to Roth.
Sure. They just want to pay less taxes. That's it.
Just
They,
pay
they
less
want to
taxes.
make as much money as possible and pay less taxes.
Okay. Have they been saving well throughout their working career?
Sure.
Okay. So I know it's a lot of questions, but all of these things matter. You can't just give a blanket answer to anyone.
Okay.
So in this case, um, I never want to say always or never, but in this case, I would say there's a high probability that a Roth conversion for this couple is going to make
Walk
sense.
us through that. Why?
Well, a couple of things, and they're at a tricky age too, but it's a convenient age, right? They're 60 years old. At 65, Medicare kicks in. And not that we're talking about Medicare today, but just a brief little blurb on it. Medicare, you pay a certain amount of Medicare out of your Social Security
Hmm.
when you turn 65. And that amount is determined by the income that you make each year.
Okay.
Well, IRS has a funny thing that they do a 2-year look back, right? So when you're 63, they start looking at your income on what they're going to charge you at 65. And then depending on that income level, you may have to pay something called IRMA. IRMA
Hurricane Irma.
Hurricane Irma. It's going to feel like that if you don't know what Irma is before you turn 65, because Irma is technically a fee or penalty on your Medicare, where it doubles and sometimes even triples depending on the income you make. Well, how does all of this tie into Roth conversions? Well, Roth conversions are considered ordinary income. So depending on how much you convert, you could unknowingly jump yourself into an income level to where you get hit by IRMA for 2 years, every year for 2 years after your last
Oh,
conversion.
wow.
Sounds confusing, I know. But in this case, it may make sense for us to do more of a Roth conversion at 60, 61, and
So you don't
62.
have to do it lump sum, you can stage it.
That was my next point. Great, great lead. Some people may decide to do a Roth conversion all in one lump for many reasons that we could talk about, but most people will do it gradually over time after we do the math. And I always say it's important to do the math. And what's interesting about that is, we've been building financial plans for 15 years now, and not all financial planning software is created equal.
Sure.
Only a handful of financial plans that I've ever come across have an analysis or a program in it that does the math for you, bringing the future into the present for Roth conversion. So you can show a person, not just tell them, see, ink on paper. What could you save if you did a Roth conversion throughout your life expectancy, or even the benefit of what it does for your heirs?
Okay. I would say 9 out of the last 10 potential clients we met with, we asked them about Roth conversions, and 9 out of 10 didn't do it or were recommended not to do it by their advisor. Why do you think that is?
One of these answers is going to be speculation, but what I would tell you is knowledge is power and you got to do the math. Yesterday, yesterday I was talking to a potential client and they said the former advisors they've talked to said don't do it. Now there could be, maybe they have their own reasons for it. But while we were doing the math, it made sense for them to do it. So my only, again,
But
speculation.
why do you think?
Right. It's a fine line. Is many advisors don't want to talk about Roth conversions for one of two reasons. One, they just don't want to run the numbers and they don't want to do the math. Two, financial advisors or wealth managers get paid on the amount of assets they manage, they hold. Well, every time a client does a Roth conversion, as we said earlier, they have to pay taxes on it. Where do they get the money to pay the taxes that year?
You tell me.
Probably from their accounts that the financial advisor is managing. Last year, this because we did it together. Last year at GDS, we sent around $15 million back to our clients, specifically for taxes on Roth conversions that we helped promote. Because as a fee only fiduciary, it's not about what's best for our pocket, it's about what's best for the client. And we would rather give up that asset or give up that 15 million because it's better for them than try to hold it and
Okay.
not do what's best for our clients.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. What
Absolutely.
about talk to me a little bit about RMDs. So on those that aren't familiar, RMDs are required minimum distributions.
Mhm.
At what age do we have to do required minimum distributions? How does that work in an IRA? How does that work in a Roth? What are some things we need to be aware of?
RMDs require minimum distributions. The age you have to do them depends on when you were born, but normally it's between 73 and 75.
Okay.
So let's start with what is a required minimum distribution and why do they exist? Well, I'm going to quote a famous philosopher, Glenn Smith.
Sounds smart.
One of his famous quotes when we talk about Roth RMDs, required minimum distributions, is the government looks at your traditional IRA, and let's say you don't need the funds. You're living off of a pension, you're living off of Social Security, and you've got a nice chunk of money in a traditional IRA, so not a Roth.
Okay.
And you get to 73, 74, 75, whatever age you're going to do required minimum distributions. The government, even though you don't need the money, is going to force you to start taking those distributions out
That's
at a
messed up.
percentage rate. It is at a percentage rate every year. And to quote Mr. Glenn Smith over here, they do that because it's the government's way of saying you've held on to your money long enough. Now you got to start paying some taxes on it, right? And you're also going to pay taxes on whatever tax bracket you're in.
Okay.
Well, you don't need the funds. You're living off of this other income, and now you're being forced to pay taxes on it. Not fun. The other thing is if you pass away, how it gets passed to your heirs is extremely important because your heirs in a traditional IRA are going to be forced to take out required minimum distributions over a 10-year time frame.
So in that scenario I gave you, I'm a 60-year-old couple. I and my wife pass away. Our three children. Let's say by then that 2 million's grown to 6 million. They each inherit 2 million on their own. How are they going to take money out? Each of them.
They are going to be forced to take out that money over a 10-year time frame. They can take
This is
it.
a traditional and a Roth.
This is yes, for a
Okay.
traditional and a Roth, they're going to be forced to take it out. But in the traditional specifically, they can take it. Or traditional and Roth specifically, they can take it out all in the first year, take it out a little at a time, wait till the 10th year. Well, when do people mainly inherit money? Normally, it's usually in their highest income earning years. Your parents are
Okay.
retired, they pass away, you're in middle of life, you're earning well. So now they're being forced to take out money at their highest tax bracket probably ever, and for money they may not even
So they
need.
could take it out, but the thing is, if they don't need it, they're forced to take it
They're
out. Is that
forced
what
to
you're
take
saying?
it out.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Now, let's pivot back to the Roth IRA.
Okay.
Roth IRA, same rules apply. You have to take it out over a 10-year time frame, whether it's the first year, over time, or at the 10th year, right?
Okay.
So same rules apply.
Okay.
But when we're talking to clients and we realize what they've inherited, if it's just a traditional IRA, they may go, when do I take it out? In some cases, it may make sense, especially if they're already at a high tax bracket, to take it all out in the first year. I'm not saying that makes sense for everybody,
Okay.
but why? Well, it's going to be invested. It's going to continue to grow. So that 2 million in your example continues to grow. You're paying, let's say 37% tax rates on it. Well, now you can either pay 37% on the 2 million up front or take it a little bit at a time, but that 2 million is going to grow, maybe 3, maybe 4 million. So
Sure.
you're going to pay 37% on a higher dollar amount at a longer period of time, right?
Yep. Makes sense.
So you may want to rip that Band-Aid off and take it all in the first year. What about the Roth? Remember, the
Tell me.
reason we do Roths is because they grow tax exempt. It's one of the only vehicles we have to shelter us from taxes in the future. So in the sense of your kids inheriting, money, if it's in a Roth, they can take it over 1 year or each year over 10 years. But I would say in some cases, if you can, wait till the 10th year. Let it get all of those gains. Let it continue to grow tax exempt. And now the savings and taxes for you is $1, but for your kids could be more than double.
What else? Anything else? What I'm hearing you say is do the math on Roth conversion, see what makes the most sense. Most of the time, it makes sense, not always. That sometimes potentially advisors maybe not recommending a Roth conversion because it's not in their best interest, although it would be in the clients. What's the last thing you'd like to tell somebody if they're considering a Roth conversion? Um, what are the last couple thoughts that you want to recap that with?
The biggest thing I can tell anybody, and we already said it, is do the math. And if somebody tells you no, that it doesn't make sense, I would always say, at least let me see ink on paper. And if they don't show you that, get a second opinion. We're happy to do it.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Robert.
Oh, my pleasure. I appreciate it.
Okay, so we got a couple questions that came in, Robert.
All right.
First one is,
Hit me.
can I use the money in my kid's 529 plan if none of them go to college or have kids?
Yes. Actually, it's a great question. Whoever sent that in. About let's call it 2 years ago, something came out in Sec 2.0, which allowed individuals that had 529 funds. Because one,
Okay.
one of the biggest things about 529s for anybody who doesn't know their college savings accounts, that you want to use them for your college, your kids' college, right? But sometimes there's leftover money, or maybe the kid just doesn't go to college, as the question suggested. What can you do? Well, before, many years ago, when you take it out, you're hit a penalty, not just taxes on the growth, but a 10% penalty on the dollar amount that was put in, because the whole purpose of that is to be used, the tax advantage to be used for education. But 2 years ago, when Sec 2.0 came out, they said that if all assets aren't used, you can do up to $5,000 per year for a total of, let's call it 7 years, for a total of $35,000. So they're going to allow $35,000 of a Roth to
Okay.
be or of a 529 to be moved over into a Roth IRA for your child. But the kid has to have earned income, right?
Okay.
They still have to have earned income, and they can only go up to the limit of the Roth contributions each year, which currently in 2025 is 7,000 for anyone under 50.
Okay. And they can invest whatever they want in that Roth IRA?
We can invest as
Okay.
fiduciaries into our models and help grow the money.
But if that person had an account at, Fidelity, Schwab, or whatever, they can invest in whatever they want in that Roth
They
IRA?
could, yes, sir.
Okay.
Mhm.